Let's do it.
We're on. We're in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn podcast. And here's the thing. When you're kind of flying live without a wire, without a net, sometimes this happens. You meet people right now. So I am just meeting you, Dr. Monique Vanni, right now. How are you today?
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Good.
Where are you sitting?
I'm sitting in my living room behind this gallery wall, which I think looks cool for.
I see David Bowie. I can't see
Yeah.
much else though. What else is back there?
We've got some fine art photography, some posters, some paintings, a bit of everything.
Fantastic. Nice.
So I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil.
Okay.
Beautiful sunny day over here.
Wonderful. And I'm coming from Mexico City, Mexico.
Oh, amazing. I lived in Mexico City.
Oh, well, which part did you live in?
And Polanco.
Of course. That's most of where I live. Cool. So are you Brazilian?
Yes.
Oh, I was reading your LinkedIn profile and Brazilian did not come across.
I have a very British education, right?
That's why. I guess maybe I thought you were British.
And a decisively mid-Atlantic accent is what I'm told, which is like messy American, sometimes more British, just discombobulated accent. Yeah.
Well, let's find out. Super cool. You are a part of the Strive Foundation, and that's what we're going to be talking about here on the podcast. Yes?
Yes. So the Strive community.
Strive community, which is a part of the MasterCard Foundation, or funded by the MasterCard Foundation. Yeah.
So the Strive community is a program that is managed by Caribou Digital, which is a small boutique focused on digital inclusion, based out of nowhere. So we're completely remote. And we have been given this program to manage worldwide, so everywhere except North America, by the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth.
Okay. All right. Is the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, is it part of the MasterCard Foundation?
No, they're separate. So interestingly enough, the MasterCard Foundation now is no longer connected to MasterCard, and it has become its own thing. Mm-hmm. So they've kept the name, but it's no longer connected to MasterCard, whereas the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth is actually the philanthropic arm of MasterCard, the business. So there's a close connection, and we rely a lot on MasterCard, the business, to kind of, find partners and scale things and things like that.
Well, I even noticed in the Strive community that, the orange and red circles coming together were there. That was like the first tip off. I think that's that's nice co-branding there.
Yeah, it's nice. We have to be careful, even from a legal perspective, that the branding is MasterCardy, but not too MasterCardy. So
that's so cool. So, this is the eLearn podcast. And so my really cool, like my first question is, like, you're a virtual organization. Caribou is a virtual organization. The community is a virtual community. Tell me how you manage that, right? So many of the people who are listening or will listen to this conversation either work remotely or learn remotely or teach remotely. And yes. So what have been the biggest challenges and that you've had or that you've been facing that the community is either currently overcoming or has found a way to navigate that is able to bring people in and feel like they're engaged and feel like they're a part of something?
I think, I'll be honest with you, I find that remote work works really well for a certain type of profile of people. And so I think remote organizations end up kind of repeating a type, right, of people that come in and do well, whereas other people struggle. So I think it's just self-selecting in many ways of who's going to make it and who's not. And unfortunately, the biggest challenge that I find is training junior staff. Because if you're a senior professional and you know what you're doing and you know what you need to get done, then you're going to get your tasks, you're going to have your calls, and you're just going to, plow through your day and you'll know when to ask for help. I think one of the biggest challenges with junior staff is they want to solve everything and they don't know when to ask for help or, when they get stuck. And when you're face to face with someone, it's a lot easier to kind of, push through those bottlenecks really fast. And training junior staff remotely, I find really difficult. And that's something that we struggle with. So we end up being, like a bunch of very senior people working together. I think that's the biggest challenge. And otherwise, we've we've always been virtual, right? So we haven't had a transition in COVID. So we're just set up to work like that. Yeah. And as I said, I think we just recruit people who have experience working remotely and who do well.
So then let's change the perspective to the organizations that the Strive Foundation serves.
Yes.
And talk to me about those, like, so what is it that you deliver to those organizations or the support that you provide? And then we can go from there.
Okay. So what we do is we have a fund that we manage, that is the Strive Community Fund, and we find grantees. And the way the program works is we will find in a particular market somebody who knows how to work with MSEs, which is our target audience, so small businesses with less than 10 employees, knows what kind of support they need and knows how to engage them, knows how to work with them. We will help them build out a program and then look for scale partners, which are partners who have large scale digital access to MSEs to then push those programs through. So what we do is we orchestrate those partnerships, and then we help them manage the program so that they can deliver. And I think the biggest challenge is a lot of these organizations that we're working with have massive experience working with our target audience, but are not digital native organizations. Mm-hmm. So the process of like you will see like the content we've created and the videos and things like that, but the process of pushing these organizations to work in a new way so that they can think digital, produce digital content that makes sense for digital channels is the biggest challenge. And I think that's the biggest differential and the reason why Caribou is there as a buffer between MasterCard and those grantees is to upskill them and help them change the way they think so that they can change the way they deliver programs. Because international development and kind of this kind of community support organization, the way of working is still very much the same that it was 30 years ago. So that digital disruption within the process is really a challenge and really where we spend most of our time.
So how are you delivering that upskilling? You know, so I mean, I guess that's our wheelhouse here in this podcast is, you know, not only scale that's you know provided by the advent of digital, you know, of online learning and those kinds of things, but also the effectiveness. So take me, I mean, like the most basic questions. Do you have like, okay, hey, we've just signed you up, you know, community support organization or community development organization or financial inclusion organization or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And you're look, I mean, do they even have access? Are you working with communities that even have sort of bandwidth and access and, you know, sort of, you know, a strong enough pipe that you can deliver this stuff effectively?
So yes, and we pre-select, right? So this is a constant challenge, and I've worked in international development all my life. You want to help the most vulnerable, but you have programs and initiatives that are not going to help the most vulnerable. You're wasting your resources if you try to fix something that is unfixable. So you have to make sure that you scope it right. And we are scoping micro entrepreneurs that already have access to you know minimum digital access. And in a sense, COVID was a great boost, right? Because everybody went online. So what we're dealing with now is a population worldwide of MSCs that are already, you know, on WhatsApp trading and kind of, you know, even if rudimentarily, you know, using digital tools for their businesses. So we're actually coming in a stratum of population that is already online. Mm-hmm. Now, we need to then use that opportunity to change the ways these support organizations are working. So to give you some practical kind of nuggets, one thing that we find, for example, is every development project starts with a needs assessment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, right? Yeah. So what do they need? What are they using? You know, how do we reach them? Now, if you're going to do something digital, you have to start thinking very much from kind of a design thinking lens. And you have to think, what is the content that I'm going to design? How am I going to deliver it? What is the impact that I need to have? Because we're looking for behavior change, right? My KPI is not have they watched the video, but have they adopted a digital tool? Have they improved their income? So I need this to, you know, percolate and be used. And you need to think backwards about, you know, what is the content that I'm going to design? What do I need? You know, what is my learning trajectory? How does my learning trajectory maybe intersect with other program activities and things like that? And you need to really use a design thinking lens to create that needs assessment to make sure that you get the inputs that you need. And so already perhaps the most overarching theme that we get across our programs, and we're working in every continent with a variety of grantees, is that the needs assessment is a struggle for everyone, because it's already a completely different way of doing things. Because I need to know, how long does that video need to be? Do you have, does the video need to come to you through an LMS? Do you need to be able to download it where you have Wi-Fi so that you can watch it later? What is the look and feel that you need? A lot of these design elements that people are really used to thinking about when they're, scoping out their audiences are crucial to our design, because you guys are specialists in this. You can't force somebody to look at a screen. They have to be interested, right? And a lot of traditional development is like, oh, we're going to do a training, and then there's a social capital and kind of like physical proximity incentive for people to come to the training and to listen, and then they'll get a coffee break and they'll hang out and things like that. And so it's a lot easier to kind of corral your audience into a room and upskill them like that. But if you're upskill them digitally, you're going to have to create something that's sufficiently interesting for them to take time out of their busy lives and sit with you remotely on their phone to look at your content. So you have to be really sharp in how you assess those needs.
So give me a best case, we love this sexy example, and this one fell flat, and we really missed the we swung and we just completely missed it from what Strive has done over the last year or so.
Without naming names, obviously.
No, you don't have to call. I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just like, we like the work. I'd like because so many times we think we have a formula for. I know how we're going to make this engaging, and yet what we actually find is, no, we just needed to deliver at 5 p.m. because that's when everybody gets off work. You know what I mean? And and so I'm just wondering, what have you found, especially because you're working in contexts that many people who are listening right now just don't even think about, right? Like, I'm fortunate to have that experience, but that's what I'm. So like when I'm delivering to Uganda or Tanzania or Cambodia, it's just a different thought process. So what have you found? Like, I'd love to hear just like, this was unexpected and this killed it. Or maybe you do have a formula that works. I don't know. You tell me.
I think we're starting, some of our stuff is going live now, and a lot of it is kind of down the pipeline. So we don't have that much experience in what has worked other than the A/B testing and the general testing. But I think in general, where we've done best is where we have created a program around a very specific local need with a partner that really knows their audience. And where we haven't done well is when we've been like, let's do this thing because it seems interesting. And like, we feel from the literature that we should be investing in this. And then we totally tanked because there's a lot of competition for attention out there. And I mean, even partners who have like those scale partners that I mentioned before, who have access to those MSCs, they don't want something prepackaged that they're going to distribute. They want something that they feel is really tailored. So I think that's the biggest takeaway so far. And one thing that we found very difficult also is adapting content across regions. So
what's a concrete example of that? Like a piece of content?
So we have a really, really good e-commerce toolkit that was created for us by TechnoServe, which is an amazing partner. They have, if you look at our blog, that's a really good resource for people to look at, is how they design the content, and their whole A/B testing strategy is really well described in there. I think that's a really worthwhile piece of work to look at. They did an amazing job. And they created characters that we thought are, very kind of global looking. And I have trouble getting my Southeast Asia counterpart to adopt that content because she feels like, well, this guy looks a bit too Indian. He doesn't look Southeast Asian enough. Are people going to be into it? So, yeah, I mean, you have to be really sharp with virtual content if you're, trying to gain some bandwidth on people's days. That's what we found. So a lot of times we have to reshoot some videos and things like that to make sure that we get somebody that people identify with on the screen.
What, so going a little deeper on that, have you found as well that there is, for lack of a better term, a generational gap where, the expectations maybe of leadership, in some of these organizations and what works is one thing, and then maybe what, let's say people who are 5 years younger or 10 years younger, who maybe are either getting delivered to, or the programs are coming to them or whatever. It kind of either falls flat or misses it, or as the kids say these days, is a little cringy.
So one
Yeah.
thing that I talk about a lot is organizational psychology in the context of digital innovation. And it seems a bit fuzzy to people, but if you're in the hot seat, trying to get things across and trying to get things done, how decisions are made and how resistant organizations are to change is really a key factor of the outcome that you're going to get. So getting people to work differently is the biggest challenge that I have in my day-to-day life. And yes, there is a generational gap, but also there's a lack of tried, tested, and kind of institutionalized new ways of working in the impact sector. So there's a very kind of like tried and tested formula for program development, implementation, and upskilling that people have been using since the 60s, really. And the new way of working isn't institutionalized. So people scramble, and that impacts outcomes, and that is what is going to impact the quality of the video at the end of my program, basically.
So do you have so one of the things that I found quite a bit in my career in international development was there are leapfrog moments, right? So and that sounds kind of like what you're describing right here. And so what have you witnessed those, or are you trying to enable those, of maybe be a catalyst for those, where it's like, look, we don't have to go step by step. We can actually go from A to F.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. And I think one thing that really stifles innovation in the sector is the fact that program cycles and the funding is so overly structured. It's like a Soviet 5-year plan, right? Like on year 4, I'm going to have this workshop. And do you know what I mean? Like you approve a program.
I think we say Chinese these days, right? Yeah. Sorry.
I'm old. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so super structured. How do you create an innovation approach for a project that has such specific KPIs and activities and budgets? Like, you need to have real flexibility with your donor to go and say, hey, this tanked. We're not going to do this anymore. Yesterday I was in a call. We have an innovation fund. So in addition to a lot of the upskilling that we're doing, we have programs that combine upskilling with tool adoption. We have a really cool program in Brazil that's doing upskilling, tool adoption, gamification, credit delivery. So there's a funnel in that direction. We're testing a lot of approaches so that we can find those new pathways also. So a lot of it is experimentation. And we have an innovation fund that we've granted, I think, 8 grantees worldwide. It's $1 million fund for them to create a new tool or solution to support the digitalization of these MSCs. And yesterday I was with one of our grantees doing an update call, and they're like, listen, this is our needs assessment. We've done this. We've analyzed the value chain. This is our pesto analysis. We've done this and this and that. Actually, what we submitted to you isn't going to work. We're going to pivot and do something completely different. And I was like, awesome. Let's do it. But you're going to have to research again and think of this and things like that. And I'm totally accommodating to that. If you're talking to USA, they're going to be like, no, this isn't what I signed up for. Do you know what I mean? So that also needs to change, is that relationship with how the money flows, so that people can accept failures and iterate and, do a lot of the cool stuff that kind of the new ways of working promote.
Have you found that there is a threshold or a size where that agility becomes, less able, for lack of, and the genesis of what my thinking is here or whatever is, it's one thing to talk to as you said, your target audience is, SMEs that are 10 people, right? Yeah. I mean, you can put all of those people in a room and they can work together, and, kind of everybody wears one or maybe 2 hats, and, it's easy to kind of just say, look, let's have an all hands meeting, and, we're pivoting this way, or, and easy to communicate. But at some stage, you become an organization that's large enough where you have teams and you have a management layer and you have those things. And so that's where we start to find rigidity in organizations. have you discovered, at least maybe in your career or with with the community and the work that you're doing, is there a moment, or can agility be preserved? Or I'm just going to drop it right there and let you talk.
I think agility can be preserved. I've just finished a program at MIT that's an innovation program. We've talked about this a lot. I think agility can and needs to be preserved, right? We're at a moment where I was reading yesterday that medical knowledge duplicates every 4 years now. I mean, so
duplicates or doubles?
Doubles. Yeah. So it doubles every 4 years. So, I mean, the era is digital transformation, and, change is constant. So you have to, right? Or you die, or you're BlackBerry. But
which is still a company, by the way.
What are they selling? BlackBerries?
Legacy contracts.
I don't know. But I think what matters is, and again, I go back to organizational psychology, you're going to create innovation teams, and they all do create innovation teams. All of the larger companies now know that they have to have like these innovation cells within them. The question is, how willing is leadership to then scale innovation and work with what comes out and, reshape things and, go through the pains of redoing things. So I mean, some companies do great at, staying ahead of the curve. And I think it's those companies that aren't doing innovation kind of for show because they have to, but are really letting those teams work. And I think there's an intergenerational issue. I'm going to say something awful, but here I go.
I got a lot of gray hair. It's all good. Don't worry.
30, 40 years ago, the leadership of a company was 40. Now the leadership of a company is almost always in their late 60s or 70s. And so us Gen X have a bone to pick because we've kind of been squished out of leadership positions. And I think there's a real generational challenge here, because a lot of the people who are still sitting on boards and making decisions in a lot of these big companies are just not digital natives anymore. So there's a really difficult engagement conversation of, getting those people to think different. And because the think different is not, oh, we should adopt this CRM, or we should be doing e-learning rather than this. It's not at the end, but it's in the process and how the company's business model is going to adapt. And that's a lot harder to digest, I think. So I think that there's a big challenge there. And I think, if you look at changes in AI, or even in, like the birth of quantum or IoT of things, the tech is there. But we now have to play catch up as a society to let the organizations really absorb the technology and make the structural system change to work in a different way to make the best use of it.
How much of this change and how much of this adoption is personality based? Because I think we can obviously talk about leadership. But I think that we could probably find just as many good cases as we could bad cases there. I'm interested in your, when, again, that team of 10 people, maybe 20 people, how many of them are like, look, I do great work and I'm excited about my organization, but I also just kind of want a predictable kind of 9 to 5. And, I want to be able to come in and work with my clients or whoever my constituents are, right, that I'm supposed to be serving. Like how hard is it to move that lever in terms of digital adoption, in terms of, again, going back to agility, and so many of us are just exhausted by the pace of change.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, well, if you're looking at a small business, I think the challenge is actually, yes, there's few people to change, but those people, as you said, are wearing 5 different hats, and just, like, you don't have a head of HR, or do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have a head of this, like, you don't have departments, like, oh, who's your head of, corporate strategy, so they're very much reactive businesses. They're just,
right,
plowing through and trying to grow, which is why the Strive community pays so much attention to, what the upskilling content needs to look like and how to deliver it and things like that, because that guy is not going to go through, 51-hour modules on business strategy. He wants a 3-minute video on how to use, like a bookkeeping app, Do you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
those guys are time crunched and reacting. So it is really hard, I think, in a small organization. And it's, again, leadership really matters, I think. So you have to be able to inspire. And I think if you're looking at slightly bigger organizations, there's a really big challenge, which is when you change the way you work, you change the type of human resources that you use. So for example, when I worked at my previous job, which was a rural development focused organization, we worked with a lot of cooperatives and associations and things like that. And for example, a lot of the field officers, a lot of their job is collecting data and providing training. If that's going to be done digitally now, they're not into it because they feel like they're going to lose their job.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to create a sense of safety within people that it's like, no, you're not going to lose your job, but you're now going to be spending a lot more time at the office designing content and, you know, building dashboards and analyzing data, and we're going to upskill you so that you can transition into a new way of working. That takes time.
Mm.
And there's a generation gap because that guy who's, unfortunately, you know, I've worked with these people, you know, that 60-year-old guy who's an absolute monster at, you know, delivering trainings in person and things like that, he's going to struggle to work in this new way, and that's unavoidable.
Mm-hmm. So take me to the, you know, the sort of the e-learning component of this delivery that you do. How do you go through your design process? Ultimately, you build out some kind of learning.
Yes.
We've had everyone on this show, you know, from the most super traditional college to, you know, in our summit that happened about a month ago, our tech session, we had the head of digital learning, and which I'm screwing up his title right now, but he talked about an LMS free environment, right? They've actually started building out their learning applications and how they deliver learning across. And this is Warner Music Global, right? This is a very large, you know, well-known organization. They don't even use an LMS. So how do you guys, you know, how do you approach this, especially when you're working in low bandwidth environments and, you know, mostly mobile devices, mostly mobile phones, those kinds of things? Like what's the approach?
So to LMS or not to LMS? That is the question, right? That is a big
or what, you know, what is your definition of LMS at the end of the day?
Exactly that. I think that is a better framing of the question, because you need that core stored somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the distribution channel, the interface is something else. So what we do, again, is everything starts with the needs assessment and with the testing. So we really take an iterative approach. So we'll do a needs assessment, a very detailed needs assessment that's very practice oriented. So like, what exactly is missing? And we'll do a real analysis of the context of those MSCs, what content is available, what is working, what isn't. And so we do pilot, test, and iterate before we arrive at a final solution. And that's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And the Strive program has clear objectives in terms of where it's trying to get these MSCs to progress to. So the content is structured against kind of 3 pillars: digitizing business operations, accessing markets, and digital financial services, right? So that kind of gives us a framework to work with in terms of how we design content. And then we will kind of counter that with the segment of MSC that we're working with, and, you know, the type of skills that they need. So for example, in Latin America, what I did was I created I took those MSCs and I put them in 2 pots. So you have these more mature MSCs, which are like, you know, those that have like the 5 to 10 to maybe 15 employees that are, you know, operating already kind of, you know, fully formalized, which is not the case for a lot of the other MSCs, and have, you know, formal employees and, you know, like have some level of structure, are using some level of tools and things like that. And they're going to have completely different needs than what we call the tienditas, or the mom and pop shops, or technically the micro retailer, which is the guy who's just like, you know, he's got a little kiosk and he's selling online and things like that. So you really need to tailor your audience. So we have those 3 kind of categories, and we're going to tailor what exactly they need based on that audience. And then we're really going to look at, you know, what channel makes sense, what look and feel makes sense. Do they want peer-to-peer learning? Do they want to speak to an authority? Do they want to participate in lives? Do they want a podcast? Are they using chatbots? Are they not using chatbots? I feel like the chatbot has had like a phenomenal rise, and kind of like a, you know, everybody's like, forget the web apps and everything. Let's all go on chatbots. And the engagement rate on chatbots is, good, but not also, all that. So
sure, and I just on I'm sure I've had this experience. Well, sometimes there's an application that's developed that's just absolutely perfect.
yeah,
When I pay taxes, through a particular chatbot, it is the most seamless and fantastic experience ever. But then if I go try to get help from like a tech company, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just all it is. It just feels like we're going to put up a wall and we're just going to send you some knowledge base and those kinds of things. Cause we're never really going to actually help you.
Yeah. Remember, like, dial 1 for this and dial 6, and you're like in this maze of numbers on your phone, and you're just doing the same on the chatbot. And you're just waiting until the chatbot gets exhausted so you can talk to someone. But yeah, so I mean, engagement is hard. I'm going to tell you, engagement is the biggest challenge when that person is not seeking out learning for their own improvement, but you're trying to suggest to them that upskilling is going to improve your business. Engagement is the biggest challenge, which is why, for example, we're working on combining upskilling with gamification with Flourish, which is a Silicon Valley-based gamification company, to see if we can understand the behavioral nudges and really map out the process that can take an MSC from unengaged to visualizing content to actually, adopting one of the behaviors or tools that they were, upskilled to adopt. So it's very experimental. I have no answers at this point of what is actually going to work. And I think it's very market specific also. I mean, you have such different contexts. I mean, for example, live selling is massive in Asia, right? I don't know if you know this, like they turn on these lives and they sell billions.
I lived in Bangkok for 4 years, and sure. The pop-up shop is huge.
Yeah, it's tanked in Brazil. So the contexts are widely different, and it's hard to really extrapolate lessons at this point. But what we're trying to do is cover our bases in terms of getting the best design process possible so that we engage these audiences.
Super cool. Dr. Monique Vanni, you work with the Strive Foundation and also with Caribou Digital. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And what's your title at both of those? We didn't even mention that in the beginning of the show.
So at Caribou Digital, I go between senior manager and director of research, depending on the job and the client.
Okay.
And for Strive, I'm senior manager for Latin America. So I handle all of the Latin American portfolio of Strive.
Super cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to have a conversation with me and talk about how do we deliver learning and upskilling, in these contexts that you're working right now. I really appreciate your work, and I wish you all the best.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.